Good morning and welcome to our 9th ED Talks quick sessions that focus on leadership, entrepreneurship, and recovery for our regional businesses. I'm Jerry Sagona, Vice President of Business Development, and on behalf of the Rockford Area Economic Development Council, I want to sincerely thank you for taking the time in your schedule to be with us today. The Rockford Area Economic Development Council, in partnership with Rockford University and the Paris School of Business, started these sessions to support our community efforts to respond, recover, and reopen our local business and manufacturers. Please take time to reference the RADAC website at www.rockfordil.com for additional resources. Today we have Dr. Renee Just, who tackles the topic change, and life change is inevitable. Today we will take a deeper dive into understanding the concept and provide a few tips to guide you along the journey. Dr. Renee Just spent over 2 decades working in a range of positions for million-dollar and billion-dollar enterprises. In 2004, she launched a consulting practice that focuses on helping entrepreneurs and small business owners set strategic goals and devise action plans. She is an associate professor of leadership in the Paris School of Business at Rockford University, as well as the director of the degree completion programs offered in the evening. She has been teaching for over a dozen years, and most recently, her teaching and research has been focused on entrepreneurship, generational differences, and leadership. Dr. Just holds a PhD in industrial and organizational psychology from Capella University, a Master of Arts in industrial and organizational psychology from the University of New Haven, and a Bachelor of Science in business administration from Albertus Magnus College. In addition to her current academic accomplishments, Dr. Just received her second doctorate from Vanderbilt University in leadership and learning organizations this past December. At the end of the presentation, Dr. Just will answer questions, so please submit any questions you have through the chat box function on your screen. Before we begin, I would like to give a shout out to Anna Garrison, Manager of Projects Events with RADAC, who skillfully runs these productions behind the scenes. Thank you, Anna. And now, please welcome Dr. Renee Just.
Hello.
Hi, Dr. Just. Did you see the indicate? There you go.
There we go.
All right. Somehow everything went blank for a second. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you so much, Jerry and Anna, for the introduction, and thank you, everybody, for joining us today. So I want to talk about change today. And some of the areas I'm going to touch on are some of the factors that drive it, a little story about cheese, and have a conversation about changing your life and different models and approaches that we can take, and then have you think a little bit about your own plan. So first, let's consider what drives change in our lives. And I don't know about you, but when I was excuse me, younger, I didn't change until I really felt the pain. I'm more adept at change today because I've realized throughout the years that not all change is as bad as I had perceived it to be. And one thing we can probably all agree with is that change happens whether we want it to or not, whether we're prepared for it, whether we like it, we hate it, or we're indifferent, it will happen. And so the key is really what we do. So here are some pictures of some factors that might drive change or impact change or prompt change in our lives. And certainly a birth of a child, a death creates change. Coming into wealth, having money and not having money creates change. New jobs, weather, and we certainly can't forget the coronavirus has created change in all of our lives. And, 10 months ago, it threw a lot of people into a, oh my goodness, now what do we do? And what's plan B? And kind of a reaction mode, which for many people, then we went into, okay, here's here's what things are looking like now. Here's what things are looking like is the new normal. But that initial process for some, for many, for different industries was all over the place. So we don't have the ability to interact and be together and see each other, but I really would like for you to kind of think about these questions. Now, we all have dreams, desires, and goals. We have visions for ourselves, be it professionally or personally. So what are your dreams? What are your visions? What are the thoughts you have for yourself? And what's preventing you from acting on your dreams? Maybe you don't have the support network around you. Literature shows that change is often more successful when we engage a support network, be it for a cheerleading squad, for accountability, or simply just to know that somebody is there. With any luck, by the end of our time this morning, you'll take away a tip or two that might get you one step closer to embracing that change. So I want to talk about cheese for a minute. So this book by Dr. Spencer Johnson was really interesting. It's a lighthearted parable, and it's about change. And there's 4 characters. And it tells a story about how they search, they find, they lose, and rediscover their cheese as they work through a maze. So, as I just said, it's a parable. It's about 4 characters that they live in a maze. They all love cheese, and when their cheese disappears, the 2 characters, Scurry and Sniff, which you'll see in the next slide, they're mice. They enthusiastically head out into the maze in search of new cheese. And on the other hand, the other 2 characters, Hem and Haw, feel betrayed, and they just complain, and they're all down, and they've got this attitude, and they're having a hard time shaking it, and they're wasting their time and energy hoping that the old cheese will return. And the one character, Haw, realizes that the old cheese is not going to return, so he sets out into the maze in search of new cheese. So what he does when he's in the maze is he's writing what he's learning on the walls, because his buddy Hem has decided to stay in his little house and not come out. So he's writing everything in directions and what he's finding and what's working, what's not working on the walls, hoping that his buddy will see it. So eventually, he discovers new cheese, and that he sees that the other 2 characters, Scurry and Sniff, are already there. So it's really not a story about cheese. It's kind of a metaphor for what you want. What do we want to have in life? It could be a good job, it could be a loving relationship, money, health, whatever it might be. But the core message of this book is that things constantly change, and that we have to adapt. And that the quicker we adapt, the change is, we can be more satisfied with the actual outcome. And I would recommend that if you can grab this, it's a inexpensive download from Amazon, or if there's used copies all over the place for a couple of bucks. It's a silly little story about 2 type of human characters and 2 mice, but we can all see ourselves someplace within these 4 characters and in different situations in our lives. And it's a really easy way to reflect on how we handled that change, and how do we want to handle the change in front of us. Do we want to complain that it wasn't our idea, or that it didn't go the way we wanted? Or are we going to go out and we're going to write on the wall what we're finding and what's working and what's not working, and what direction or what road we've gone down and hit a dead end or a road bump? So it really is a great way to take a look at how we approach change. Excuse me, are we looking for the short term? Are we looking for the long term? Are we organized and structured? So again, if you have an opportunity, this is a great little book, and it's a very short read. So where I want to go from here is a couple of models to consider. So Lewin and Cotter are two of my favorite change gurus, and I use their models personally, professionally, with clients and with students alike. They are adaptable, and you're going to see that Lewin offers two models that are quite simple and very impactful. So I'm going to share with you two models that can be used professionally and that I have used professionally and used with clients. And then there's another model that can be used professionally, but certainly is very easy to use personally when you're looking at any kind of a change initiative. So the first model professionally is Lewin's theory of change. And the whole idea is, as you can see, there's three simple stages. And one is that we unfreeze. So unfreezing is really the change process in which leaders help associates move beyond the past by providing a rationale for the change and creating a sense of safety regarding the change. So some tactics that you might use is reminding people that they've successfully changed at some point in their life in the past. Communication and education are two tactics and modes that you cannot overdo. You can't over communicate and you can't over educate when you're looking at change, especially in the workplace, because people operate on fear often. So the change part is where we're executing it. So we've unfrozen, we've said, okay, we're not going to do this way anymore. We're going to change. We've educated on it. We've communicated the plan and the whole process. And here we are now. Now we're changing, and now we're going to solidify the new standard operating procedures or the new whatever the change was. And we're going to shed what it was yesterday, and here we are today, and this is what we're going to be moving forward. So when we're refreezing, it's the phase of the change process that leaders lock in the new approaches. And you lock them in by evaluating, by implementing new evaluation systems, and we track the expected behaviors. Oftentimes in this, as we're going through this, you're going to have some naysayers that are going to want to hold on. So in this part, when we're really locking in the new approaches, it's common to create a reward system that provides incentive for buy-in, and also incentive for employees to bring along coworkers who might not seem to be moving so willingly. So another professional model is Cotter's 8 steps. So you can see that they really are put into 3 buckets. We're creating the climate for the change, we're engaging the whole organization, and now we're implementing and sustaining the change. And I'm not going to go through all of the steps because you can see them here. So one of the most important parts of this change model is creating that sense of urgency. The urgency stems from education. People need to understand the need for change. What's going to be different? What's going to be better? What would the consequences of not changing be? So that's how we create that climate for change, and we create the sense of urgency, and we start building the team that's going to help guide through the change. Is by people understanding the why are we doing this? Because so often, and I'm sure that you've been a part of situations like this where change has just been handed down and it can be discounted, or you might hear people saying, oh, here goes, another change, or we've done this, 10 times in the last 15 years. Why is that? And where's that coming from? So it comes from a lack of understanding and a lack of urgency and a lack of the team that you have to move forward. And that team is made up of change agents. and it's change agents in an organization that really help the process go along much smoother. So, and as you can see in the second stage, we empower action. So we empower employees. So we communicate to get the buy-in, and we empower action. And we might set up a task force and empower an employee to research part of the change or be able to communicate part of the change to their own coworkers. Change in organizations, it's much like when we were growing up. You know, your mother would say something to you or give you advice, and we thought that she didn't know what she was talking about. Yet 30 minutes later, our best friend could say the same thing, and they were just thinking brilliant. So it's all about the messaging, and it's all about the communication. And the third model is, as I said earlier, it's one for professional as well as personal, and it's very user-friendly. So in this model, we have a goal in the center, or some call it the status quo. And then we brainstorm all of the driving forces for change, as well as the restraining forces holding us back. So it's a great model you can use personally, as the brainstorming can be done by yourself, with a partner, a spouse, or a friend. And I'm going to use an example that comes up when I ask for examples, and it's something that is oftentimes very relatable. So our problem is weight loss. So the first thing we do in this instance is we're going to brainstorm all of the driving forces for us to lose weight. So here are some of them. We might say, I don't like my appearance, my clothes don't fit, I should lose weight because I have a family history of obesity or a family history of diabetes or other health issues. I'll have more energy. Research shows that my lifespan will be increased. My insurance might be cheaper. So these are legitimate driving forces. So then in turn, we now brainstorm restraining forces. What's holding us back? Well, we could say that we don't have any energy, I'm not motivated, I don't have time, I work long days, I have kids. It can be more expensive to eat different or healthier. I have a health issue, or it's in my genes. Everybody in my family is overweight to some point. So then from here, what we do, and what I would do with you as an individual or with a client, is I would say, okay, great. Let's start with the restraining forces. What do we have control over? Because let's face it, when we get into a funk, we aren't motivated. We get into habits of just sitting on the couch or eating in front of the television, and we're not motivated. But the reality is we have control over that. And the motivation and the energy both tie in together, as does the lazy. And it's hard to change our routines, and it's hard to change our habits, but hard doesn't mean that we can't do it. So we can start, so the idea here is, what can we eliminate? So we can automatically eliminate the motivation, the energy, the lazy. So we recognize that we've got control over some of these. As for time, it often makes a world of difference if we schedule our personal life as we do our professional life. So it takes more time to eat healthy, and it can be more expensive. But because hand in hand, it means that chances are you're eating healthier, which can, and you're preparing meals and not eating prepared meals or fast foods. And while it can be more expensive to eat healthy, you can simply begin by counting calories and adjusting your portions. Weight Watchers has a plan that includes pastas, rices, and grains, which tend to be less expensive foods to purchase. So it's all about researching and what are your options to cross this restraining force off of your list. And fast food value meals are easy and cheap. And when you've had a long day and you've got kids, it's easier to do that. And people aren't going to change overnight. And this is a hypothetical. I'm not speaking clearly to anyone. But kids take our lessons and they take our leads from us. So it's all about balance. And so, you start with 1 day a week of making a pasta or making something at home. And maybe you package lunches the night before, write a meal schedule for the week, bulk cook on weekends. And I'm not in any way saying these are guaranteed solutions, but we have to begin someplace with breaking down barriers. And I've used weight loss, again, because it was an easy go-to, it's relatable. With any issue or problem or change we're trying to make, there's not going to be one easy solution. It's really the old adage of you eat an elephant one bite at a time, and it's really just chipping away. And what can you start crossing off of that list? When we start crossing something off of our to-do list or our restraining forces, that in itself is motivating. So if we take a look at this, possibly only 2 on this list are potential barriers, and which is health and genes. And absolutely, there may be 100% validity there. I am not an MD, but it doesn't provide us excuses to give up on something. So as we can see that there are some things in here that we can do, the whole idea with this change model is that once we begin to remove the restraining forces, the driving forces naturally take over. So we have a couple of models. Now let's talk about some resistance and why do we resist change? Professionally, people resist change because they may be out of date with technology. They may be full of fear that they're going to lose their job. They're going to lose control over their professional environment. Personally, we watch our families and we learn things from generation to generation. And sometimes it simply becomes the 100-year rule. And somebody asks, why do you do something? Well, we've always done it this way. Okay. Maybe we resist change because we don't know what's in it for us. And, I'm comfortable where I am. And unless I really have to, I'm going to put it on the back shelf. So some of the ways to reduce resistance, and as I said earlier, that, professionally, education and communication are key, whether you're driving change or a part of the population being impacted by the change. Understanding the core or root cause driving the change helps achieve that buy-in. And personally, understanding why you might resist change and the pros and the cons of the actual change or the consequences of resisting can be very helpful. And ask yourself, what is it that you're resisting? Is it the actual change? What about that are you fighting and are you pushing back against? Maybe you're really not going to lose something. What are the unintended consequences? What are you gaining from the change? And in the very first session that we did, I believe in September, I talked about a growth mindset. And that's where we don't go with the status quo. We don't go with the way we've always done things. We question why or why not. That helps reduce resistance and change of making that pro and con list and asking why not? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? So this is the reaction to change. This is a very typical description of stages individuals may go through as it relates to change. It's not just who you may experience some of you may experience some of these. Think about people that you know, and I'm sure we have experiences watching someone deny the need for change feeling emotional or angry. After all, change is often easier, for lack of a better word, when we initiate the change on our own accord rather than finding ourselves in a position that we have to change or it's driven by somebody else. And oftentimes that's where a lot of the resistance comes in. If it's not our idea or if we didn't see it first and it comes from somebody else, sometimes it takes us longer to catch up, which is why I would say go back to the why. What are you resisting? What are the positive upsides? What are the unintended consequences? If it's change that is forcing us out of our comfort zones, we may question our abilities. And this is all to say that these stages are normal and oftentimes a part of the process. The key is to remember that change is a process. It's not an event, it's a process that we start with. And sometimes the change is going to be shocking to us. Sometimes we're going to deny it and we're just going to ignore it. So ignoring and denying in here are two words that I'm going to use interchangeably. One, we can't believe it's happening, or two, I'm just not going to deal with it. Or how many times have we said, I'm not ready to deal with this. I can't think about this right now. Then it's frustrating. It's frustrating, especially if we have to learn a new skill. And then we start getting some of our confidence back and we start maybe finding clarity and understanding, well, maybe this isn't going to be so bad. That's our whole step into accepting what's happening and embracing it. And then oftentimes we get to the end, or more times than not, maybe the change wasn't as bad as we thought it was. It was really our own fear of the unknown and our lack of understanding. So to keep that whole thought process going between the shock and the whole I got this. So here's a poetic interlude. So I walk down the street, there's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in, I'm lost, I'm helpless. It's not my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it still isn't my fault, and it still takes a long time to get out. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it. I still fall in. It's habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk, and I walk around it. Or I can walk down another street. Remember, we always have choices. Maybe not in the actual change itself, but in how we address it, cope with it, and embrace it. So I want to thank you for being here this morning. And I chatted a little bit about some of the factors that drive our change, discussed a parable about a cheese maze, shared a couple of models and approaches, and talked a little bit about resistance to change. And again, I would like to thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Just. We have a couple of questions here that are coming on to our chat feature. The first one is, in one of the previous ED talks, there was a mention of the importance of intrapreneurship. How can those intrapreneurs encourage change up the hierarchy of an organization?
Excellent question. So an entrepreneur, as we remember, which tells me that you were in our first session, is that you're working in in an organization and you have been given freedom to affect change, to develop something or pursue something. And how you affect change going upward is one, through your plan of being an entrepreneur and what your organization has granted you authority over. But how you're going to affect change going up is how you affect change with your immediate colleagues and those working for you. You can be talking up, but your greatest way to affect change as an entrepreneur is getting the buy-in of your colleagues and those working for you moving forward and being able to show the change that you have affected. That will then get the attention of those up the ladder.
Okay, another one that came in is kind of a brief question, but change happens with or without me. So why not just go with the flow?
So I love it. So it kind of reminds me of, when we're all in, gosh, 100 years ago when we were all, well, at least me, I'll speak for myself, in high school. And some of my classmates, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And others said, yeah, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to stay local. And I'll get a job. I'll do something. And 5 years later, you go back to visit and they're still doing the same thing they were doing when you left. So change does happen. But you can either look at it, the glass is half full or the glass is half empty. So the change happens, go with it could be interpreted as the glass is half empty, because if you know change is going to happen, be proactive with it, be a part of it, be involved in it, and don't just go along for the ride. So if you're a part of the driving force or you're a part of affecting that change, and yes, it is going to happen and change does happen, be proactive. How can you make the best out of that change and take the bull by the horns and run with that instead of letting things just happen to you? That's the easy way out, letting things happen to you, because then there's no accountability, no responsibility.
Okay, next question we have in is kind of a two-parter. It's, how do I know what change I need? And then how do once I know the change, what do I then do to put it to implement it?
That's great. So how do I know? So I'll go back to the example I used on weight loss. And I have personally been in a position in my life that I knew I needed to lose some weight. And I had no energy and I wasn't motivated, and we make excuses. So yeah, I knew I needed it, or I could just continue to go buy ice cream and popcorn. If you feel stagnant, if you feel stuck, if you, upon reflection, look back and think, I really thought I would be at a different place in my career or at this age, explore that. Where did you think you would be? Where do you want to be? Are you accomplishing what you wanted to accomplish? So do your own inventory about, are you happy with where you are, and really reflect on your accomplishments. And if you're not, what's missing? So then that becomes your goal. So now you know what you need, because here's my goal. No, I'm not happy where I am. I want to be in a different position. I want to I thought I would have my degree completed, or I thought I would have my master's, or whatever the case may be. I thought I'd have a child or be married, or whatever it is. So that's your goal. And so how do you implement it? So I would say that you start by implementing it with the force field analysis that you saw on the weight loss example of your driving forces for that change, now that we know what it is and what's holding us back. And as for the implementation, this may not be fair and it may not answer your question, but I will say to tune in, I believe in 3 weeks, if I'm remembering my dates correct, because I'm going to talk about goal setting, and how do we achieve our goals. Now that we know what they are, how do we get there? How do we achieve them? So I'm going to go through a whole session on the implementation and getting to where you want to be and understanding goal setting.
All right, next question we have is, isn't change avoidance a choice in itself? Therefore, why not take charge of change direction?
So can you read the second half of that again?
So the question is isn't change avoidance a choice in itself? Therefore, why not take charge of the change in direction?
Oh, I think you should. Yes, avoidance is a choice. Avoidance is a decision. But I will go back to the first participant that asked a question that I answered about the change. You can choose to avoid it, and then what happens. And while what happens, you are responsible for, because you chose to avoid it. So the other side, I will go back and say, take the bull by the horns and take charge of that change. You are correct. So, why avoid change when we can play a role in the outcome? And we may not be able to stop it, but we can have a role in the outcome, be it professional change through professional development, being on a task force or a team or an educational component of that change, or personally making the best of it and taking the bull by the horns. And yeah, I'll go back to the weight loss. Yes, if you need to lose weight, okay, you can make it an arduous process and you can resent it, or you can do the whole, you develop new habits in 30 days and start working out, start exercising, do things that are very low cost that you have total control over, and be proud of that change. So yes, I think you should take charge of change so that there is not only accountability and responsibility, but there's also a sense of pride in that change.
Doctor, can you speak a little bit about motivation, that somebody knows that they need to make some changes, but any tips on how to get them started in the right direction?
Absolutely, and that is so key. I'm glad that whoever asked that question, that's a great question. Motivation is hard to overcome. When you have lost the motivation, I would recommend that you, if it's a personal change and you've lost your motivation and you know you need to change, you just don't have the energy, who can you talk to? And it may not be a spouse, or if you don't have a spouse, it might be a close friend. It might be hopping into a social network blog or group of people that are working through the same issues or being faced with the same change. That is often so motivating when you can, one, get the thought out of your head, open your mouth, let the words come out and hear the words. Because when we keep things in our heads, the situation may be bad and you might not be motivated, but it's much worse when it is only living in your head. So one, it's important to just get the words out of our mouth. it's important to share. It's important to understand that we are not alone in whatever the challenge is that we're facing, and that there's other people going through the same thing. That in itself is motivating, because then we can learn from other people. One, we can hear the words coming out of our mouth, and that in itself is a sense of relief. But we can learn from other people. What have other people tried? What worked, what didn't work, what are you trying? And then you develop allies, and you develop, it's almost like a buddy system to help with motivation. Change your routine. You know, if your problem is you're sitting on the couch and you're eating ice cream and you know that your clothes don't fit, change your routine. Eat your meals earlier, eat them later. Just changing little things in our routine. You know, come after dinner, do a load of laundry, do something, sweep the floor, anything. But when we change our routine, it changes how the synapses in our brains work, and it starts changing the lens we're looking through. And changing a routine, doing little things around the house or in your neighborhood or taking a walk or whatever the case may be, one, it creates a new routine, but it also changes how you look at the rest of your day. So motivation is definitely an ongoing process and a battle, but I really recommend that you get the words out of your mouth, talk to somebody, share what you're going through, just so you have a buddy to understand that you're not alone.
With 2020 being a real unique year, we've been forced to change and change and change again. The question is there such a thing as change hangover, and how do we manage that?
Yeah, I think that I think in 2020 we were all drunk on COVID and change, and we're feeling the hangover as we're slowly seeing a light at the end of the tunnel and hoping it's not the train anymore, with the vaccinations and the rollouts and the restaurants opening up. And yes, there is definitely, and it's a great way to put it, there is a change hangover. So the best thing we can do is all take a deep breath. You know, there's an old saying, and I'm not going to get it right, but like, don't give up. When you're climbing Mount Everest, don't give up at the last minute because you're like at the peak. And we need to right now just breathe and settle in. We're coming out of this, and then let life settle. Don't make any major decisions. Let things settle, because we all have so many emotions stored up and pent up in us, and I can speak for many people that I have talked to recently. We're all very frustrated. We're done. We're hungover, whatever the term is you want to use. We're running out of patience. We're running out of emotional bandwidth. So yes, while you may be feeling hungover, take 2 aspirin, take a deep breath, and give it a few months. As we continue to start to the ebb and flow and coming out of this, and life opens up even more, you'll find more breathing space, but you'll also start to look at what the new normal is going to look like, and what's your place in the new normal, and what's the impact for you in the new normal. So yes, there is a hangover. Unfortunately, you're not alone. Unfortunately, we're a country or a world right now in a hangover with COVID and all of the changes that really have been thrust upon us. So, you know, the overwhelming majority of us didn't ask for any of these changes, and we didn't want them. But at this point, 10 months later, it's how we're managing them and dealing with them. And right now, all we can do is take deep breaths and create space for ourselves and be gentle with one another to understand that we are all emotionally exhausted.
Hear, hear. I agree. So looking at our chat function, I'm not seeing any other questions. So I think we wrap this up. I want to thank you, Dr. Just, for such a great presentation and providing strategies to help manage change at work and also in our personal lives. We appreciate your time and expertise. Our region is fortunate to have you and the resources of Rockford University available to us. Thank you to all that attended. We hope you found value in today's presentation that you can take with you what you learned today and share it in your workplace and your daily life. Our next webinar will be Success Through Goal Setting on February 18th at 11 a.m. in partnership with Rockford University. For more information on the webinar and other RADAC events, please visit www.rockfordil.com to learn more. Again, thank you for attending today's presentation and have a wonderful day.